Welcome to Warrior Quiz. 50 quiz question about VICTOR Revolver.
10 points will be given for each correct answer. Comment below correct answer and get points. Let's go.
Who manufactured the VICTOR Revolver originally? Of course, Harrington and Richard II. What general type is the VICTOR Revolver? Yes, pocket revolver. VICTOR revolvers often came in which era? Exactly, late 19th century. What common caliber's VICTOR was chambered? Of course, .22, .32, .38. What frame style does VICTOR typically have? Yes, solid frame. Which action type many VICTOR models used? Exactly. What capacity did small VICTORs usually hold? Of course, 5 to 7 rounds. Which market were VICTORs primarily made for? Yes, civilian pocket market. Which barrel length is typical for VICTOR? Exactly, short, around 2 inch. What finish options were commonly offered? Of course, nickel or blued. Which grip material often fitted VICTORs? Yes, hard rubber. What style of sights did VICTOR generally have? Exactly, simple fixed sights. Which VICTOR model naming existed historically? Of course, VICTOR number 3. How are many VICTORs marketed by H&R? Yes, inexpensive pocket pistols. Which cartridge was a common rimfire option? Exactly, .22 LR. Which VICTOR variant had spur trigger? Of course, early spur trigger models. What common finish indicates age/originality? Yes, period nickel plating. What user group collected VICTOR guns often? Exactly, antique collectors. What typical cylinder configuration seen? Of course, unfluted cylinder. Which country manufactured H&R VICTORs? Yes, United States. Which mechanism aided cartridge ejection? Exactly, ejector rod, solid. What is VICTOR's general intended use? Of course, concealed self-defense. Which finish was common for pocket revolvers? Yes, bright nickel plating. Which Victor versions were larger framed? Exactly, large frame variants. How were Victor serial numbers typically stamped? Of course, on top strap. Which Victor models used rimfire ammo? Yes, some .22 rimfire models. What finish often indicates later production? Exactly, modern parkerized finish. Which Victor model capacity reached 7 rounds? Of course, some small frame .22. Which features sometimes simplified manufacture? Yes, unfluted cylinder. What typical sight front shape used? Exactly, simple blade front. What common loading method applied? Of course, loading gate/pin. Which Victor variant is spur triggered? Yes, early spur trigger Victor. Which era featured top break HNR revolvers? Exactly, late 1800s. Which part often wears requiring replacement? Of course, cylinder hand. Which user practice aided concealment? Yes, small barrel length. Which finish indicates original factory condition? Exactly, sharp nickel edges. What common engraving level existed historically? Of course, little to no engraving. Which material made pivot screws? Yes, steel screws. What kind of ejector star featured? Exactly, manual star ejector. Which cleaning maintenance advised often? Of course, regular lubrication. Which grip style considered typical? Yes, saw handle or round butt. Which manufacturing city housed H&R? Exactly, Worcester, Massachusetts. What distinguishing marking says Victor? Of course, model name on top strap. Which cleaning part often removed first? Yes, cylinder. What magazine arrangement do revolvers use? Exactly, cylinder chambers. Which Victor example often appears priced lower? Of course, plain finish examples. How are original grips usually described? Yes, hard rubber panels. Which country exported many antiques worldwide? Exactly, United States. Of course, what identifying stamp often present? First, patent or maker mark. Who collects Victor revolvers today, mainly? Yes, antique firearm collectors. I hope you get many points, subscribe my channel, and get more points.